Howdy folks, this is Rob with MTG Investor, and today we're going to continue our modern top 25 list. We are going to look at cards 16 through 20 on my top 25s. If you have not watched my 21 through 25 video, go back and check that out. If you haven't watched my videos that are prelude to this, the how I evaluate cards, you might have a little questions based on my little graph here, and that video explains that thoroughly. So if you want to watch that first, click the link here in the video, or you can go down to the description. There's a link to get to the beginning of the playlist where those videos are. Otherwise, let's get started right away. Alright, number 20. First on my list is foil mutagenic growth. Specifically the foil, not the regular, although the regulars are decent, but we're looking at the foil. This card I'm a big fan of. It is played in Modern. It's not played to a great degree, but it is played in Infect, and can't recall if it's played in the Legacy Infect deck. I'm not 100% sure about that. I don't think it is. I think the little green instant that gives your opponent 4 life is played in its place in Legacy. But anyway, I think this has room for some growth. The stability rating I have it is on 5. Let me just first say I am a big fan of just about all the free spells, all the decent ones anyway. As Magic continues to get older and older and older and evolves, formats, the older formats like Vintage and Legacy, and eventually Modern, they are really looking at what they can do as quickly and efficiently, and they're willing to trade life for damage, or life for counterspell or whatever, you know. So anything that's free, you should always keep an eye on if it has some sort of functionality. And so the stability on this guy is 5. It's because I don't think it's pretty good. I don't think it's going to see reprint anytime soon. Wizards probably will try to stay away from free spells, so like for instance Force of Will and things like that, although that might be on the reserve list. But they try to stay away from putting too many free spells in the environment, because just like Mental Misstep, you saw got banned across the board in most of the formats. It was just too overpowering, and it just totally skewed the formats, and pretty much it got to the point where all the decks, even non-blue decks, were playing it. So they'll keep an eye on those. This I don't think will ever get banned. I don't think this is ever in danger of getting banned, but I don't think there's going to be a high probability of it getting reprinted unless there's a return to the Scar or the Mirrodin block, and even then it's questionable. The growth potential is 4. Probably could have bumped this up a little bit higher because it does have potential to be played. I've seen it in some Zoo decks actually, and you know, Zoo is willing to trade 2 life for 2 more damage just so they can try to put their opponent on tilt. So it's getting played there, and I think this is one of those cards that has room for growth. It has room to become better as more cards get printed. And in fact, in modern right now, it's I don't know if I would call it a tier 1 deck, but it's pretty dang close if it isn't in the right hands of people like Tom Ross and players like that, Joe Lisette and whatnot. So it just gets better with time. So if you get a hyper aggro creature deck, this could definitely find a permanent place in that. Now, right now, mutagenic growths, the full versions of them, are going for about $6. I picked up a playset of these, I want to say about 3 or 4 months ago, and they were, I want to say they were only like $3 at the time, maybe $4, and they've started moving up because a lot of the Modern prices have moved up since December 2014 because of the Modern Pro Tour in the early part of the year, and Modern's becoming a more and more played format. In general, I think Star City Games, for instance, will probably look at adding a few more Modern tournaments to their Saturday and Sunday tournament list. Standard will always be king, probably because they can probably make more money off Standard, buying and selling Standard cards. But Wizards is definitely promoting the Modern format. We have 2 Modern Masters sets in the last, basically the last 2 out of the last 3 years, and they reprinted all the Ravnica shock lands. They reprinted all the original fetch lands, and it's I mean, I would think it's almost certain that the Zendikar fetch lands are going to be reprinted. So Wizards has gone out of their way to reprint the majority of the mana base for Modern. So this format's really getting pushed, and that's why I think Modern in general is a very, very good format to be investing in. So anyway, it's at $6, and I really could see this card moving up to $12 to $15. If it stays where it is and just continues to steadily increase, I think it's pretty solid to hit $12. If it becomes even more played, then 15, 20, even $25 on this card if it starts getting more and more play. So I'm gonna go to 15 bucks on it, and again, I have a play set, and I don't normally play with foils. I just normally play with regular cards. The only exception is the arena lands from the old Ice Age, just because those are my favorite lands. But anyway, like 150% return on investment on these guys. So pick these up. They're going to only move up and increase in value, in my opinion. So, all right, let's go to number 19. Number 19 is the Innistrad lands, but specifically the Sulphur Falls one. The Innistrad lands are Sulphur Falls, Clifftop Retreat, Hinterland Harbor, Isolated Chapel, and Woodland Cemetery. And those are all pretty solid lands. Isolated Chapel probably sees the least amount of play. And this is kind of like the Scars and Mirrodin lands that I put in my previous video, the 21 through 25. And for players that are coming into Modern, when the lands get out of their price range, they look for alternatives. So like the Scars and Mirrodin lands and the Innistrad lands are big players. And the Innistrad lands are actually seeing play, specifically Sulphur Falls. The stability rating on these is kind of low, because I think these are lands that they're going to probably cycle through the format in a summer set on and off over, every 3 or 4 years, just to keep them fresh in the format. But other than that, I think they're still going to maintain some playability. The growth potential on these is 5, because as the Shocklands had rotated out a year ago, the value of those are going to increase. The Innistrad lands are going to grow with them, because people are going to use those as an alternative to the Shocklands. At least new players will. Now, these lands range anywhere from $2 to $5. Let me stick that in there like that. And as you can see, $2 to $5 right here on them. The Isolated Chapel's 2, Hinterland Harbor and Woodland Cemetery is 4, Clifftop Retreat is 5, and Sulphur Falls is, you can get it at 8 if you're a little bit patient on eBay. You can get them for 8, and maybe you can finagle them for 8 in trades or whatnot. But I think Sulphur Falls, I bought 2 play sets of Sulphur Falls back in December, so just like 4 months ago, and they're already up to $9 now. So they're already like I've already made 50% on that investment, and I think those are good. The Sulphur Falls particularly are going to go to 15. So that's only a 67% return on investment, but I think that's a really solid play. I know I have the stability low, but for the short term, I think this is just one of those rare cases where I'm going a little bit short term on this. Let's say within about a year, about 12 to 18 months, I think we're going to be at about $15. And I think most of the other ones are going to double. I would kind of stay away from Isolated Chapel. I mean, who knows, there might be black-white deck that really emerges. I mean, people are playing junk, but I don't think Isolated's in there. But anyway, the other ones I think are probably going to double unless they see a reprint anytime soon. But I think it's worth taking a chance. There's some spicier picks than the Innistrad lands, so it's not that I'm saying you should buy all 25 of my top 25 cards or anything. It's just that you got to pick. It's just something to. Not all these cards are available in trade binders if you're wanting to trade for them. If you want to buy them, you have access to buy them on many different outlets. But if you're just going to trade for cards for investment, then you need to know all the cards that are available and have good potential. So Innistrad lands, keep an eye out for those in trade binders. Okay, number 18 is Scavenging Ooze. So a lot of people love Scavenging Ooze, and with good reason. It's a solid creature. It's a 2-drop. He doesn't always get played on turn 2 because people want to keep green mana open so he can eat something in a graveyard. And So he's played as an offensive creature because he can grow, and he can grow pretty dang quickly. But he's also a great asset because he can have a defensive ability too. He can chew creatures or combo cards in graveyards, and that can be where his real value is. The fact that when people try to Snapcaster and you can eat the Snapcaster targeted card, that's where he's a real winner. Stability rating I have low on this guy too because I think Scavenging Ooze, once he got printed in M14, he became fair game to be printed in just about any set. And because of that, I think Scavenger Ooze is one of those creatures that he's not overpowered. He's not going to skew or wreck any formats by any stretch of the imagination. He's a really good, well-made, solid creature. I mean, honestly, I think Scavenger Ooze might be like the perfect kind of creature. He's a good body for the casting cost. He has a really good ability that you can't abuse, but it's effective. He's a good early drop, and he's a good late game drop. He's good to play at any time in the game, and he has a great he has a sideboard ability built into him that helps against Snapcaster and combo decks. So because of that, I think it's worth the lower rating on the stability because I think he's going to hold his value really well over time. And I think Wizards is careful now not to print cards into oblivion. So when they get good rares, they don't just print them and print them and print them and print them and print them. They keep them fresh. They only print in the Titans in two back-to-back sets. So, just keep that in mind. He's probably going to be pretty stable. The growth potential on this guy is 6 because now that M14 is kind of about a year removed, or not even a year removed. M15 just about 9 months removed or something like that. People will start picking him up. New players coming into Modern will want to try to pick him up. So he's a good pickup now before his price starts moving. So anyway, you can get him for about $4.50, and I picked up a couple play sets of him about a month ago, and just because I want to hold on to those. I think those are going to move to about the $10 range. Now, if he gets reprinted sometime in the next year, I don't see that happening, but if he does, then this is one of the rare cases where you might want to just hang on to him. If he does move up and he's like say $8 to $9 and he's going to be reprinted, then people will try to scoop him up before, like when the spoiler comes out. So before he actually sees print, people will trade pretty heavily for him. So that'll be the time to get rid of him if he's $7 or $8. But I think it'll be a couple years at least before he gets reprinted. So that's 122% return on investment. It's a pretty solid pick. He's always a good card to be picking up. All right, let's move to number 17. Number 17, I love this card. Foil Glistener Elf. And let me say this. Of these 25, of all the cards that I ranked 92. If you watch other videos, I ranked the top 50, but I pulled 92 cards that I thought were reasonable cards to pick up in Modern. And of all the cards that I have on here, there's a cutoff right at 17. So the top 17 on my Modern list are the ones that I really, really, really like a lot. And those are the ones that I would really be focusing on. It's not that 18 through 25 aren't good. It's just that there's a drop there. Just like there's also a drop somewhere you'll see when I get to the 6 through 10 video, around number 8, there's another drop right there. So, there's a couple breaks, but 17 and up, really solid picks in my opinion, cards that I really like. And I'll be honest with you, I have some low ratings, kind of a lower rating on Glistener Elf than I really should have. I have stability rating of 4 on this guy, and that's because the only reason is I don't really fear a reprint on this guy anytime soon. I mean, eventually he'll eventually get reprinted, I'm guessing, but right now I don't see it happening. But the reason why I have his stability a tiny bit low is because Infected in Modern is not like I would consider it very close to a staple deck. In the right hands, like I said, in say Tom Ross's or Joe Lassette's hands, Infect is a tier 1 deck, but it's not dominating. It shows up in top 8s, but I think this deck is only going to get better in time, and so I think you're going to see more and more of it. It's also mostly a cheaper deck to get into. It's not too bad to get into that deck. You can get that deck pretty cheap. So decks that are pretty cheap are usually decks that new players pick up because they don't have money to throw at a really expensive deck yet. So I think this one has room for a lot of growth and potential. I have it a conservative 5. You could look at it as really a 7 and really a 4. I mean, a 5 on stability and a 7 in growth. I mean, you really could rate this as a 12, to be honest with you. But I'm going conservative. Right now, you can get full glistening elves for $5. I picked up a playset about 4 months ago, and it's already moved up a little bit since then. This card, I think, is going to move to about $12. If glistening elf is a staple in Modern, and I mean, this really could go up to $25. I have a conservative number. Like I said, I try to stay conservative with my estimates. I could see a world where he's a $25 foil. If I get a chance to see him in a trade binder, I'm going to go after him. So I paid money for the ones I had, and I don't mind because eventually I'm going to make a good profit. But all right, so let's move on to number 16. Number 16 is no great surprise, is Shocklands. So if you're a new player, Shocklands are the lands from the original Ravnica City of Guild set or the Return to Ravnica set. And these are really high rated. The stability is 8 because these are the staple go-to lands of Modern. And because of that, they're always going to have a high stability. I personally think Wizards of the Coast is going to reprint Shocklands every, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years or something. They're going to keep them somehow in a rotation, and even if they reprint them, so what? Hopefully when they reprint them, they'll have new art like they did with Return to Ravnica, which will help the original Shocklands retain their value to a degree, and if the newer ones that when eventually they're going to get reprinted, then the Return to Ravnica one's going to hold some value as well. That would be the smart thing to do, and I think Wizards is a fairly smart company. So, right now these are pretty cheap to get a hold of. The growth potential is solid too because new players coming into the format are always going to need them, and they're in just about every deck. The vast majority of decks they're in. Obviously, if you play Magic, you know that. But right now the price is $7 to $12. I just put $10 for an average, and I project the average price to move up to about $20. So as you can see here, I put the price range for these guys is about 7 to 12. So the cheaper ones are about 7. The more expensive ones, basically the blue ones, are about 12. And I think the average price is going to double on all of them. I think pretty much everything's going to go back up to the $14 to $25 range. So it's basically 100% return on your investment. If you do not have Shocklands, if you do not have a full set of 40 Shocklands, 4 of the 10, then you really need to get them now, because right now they're still in people's binders, there's still leftovers of them, and people haven't really considered them to be uncommon yet. But as new players come in and those get traded and traded and traded and traded, then the price is just going to go up and up and up and up. And this is one of the more solid picks you can have in Modern. Now, to be honest with you, I could have put Shocklands way up into my top 10 and maybe even my top 5, but they're just not as sexy as a pick, because it's kind of like one of those things. Everybody knows that these are valuable, and everybody knows that these are going to go up in price, or I would hope you know that. And it's just that it's boring. It's a land, it's just like, ooh, I put a land in play. So for some reason, it just doesn't have the sex appeal as other cards do. So keep that in mind. It's okay to invest in boring cards. I invest in boring cards all the time, and it pays off big money. Lands are always solid. You've noticed already in my first 10 cards that I have 3 lands. I have Shocklands, Innistrad lands, and Scars of Mirrodin lands. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of lands as investments because you have to have them in every deck. Every deck has to have them. So, Anyway, that's my 16 through 20 investments. I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you taking your time. I appreciate your comments. And we will next move on to 11 through 15. And until then, this has been Rob with MTG Investor. And likes and subs are appreciated. Peace out, guys, and happy trading.